Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Summit Hollywood Together's Healing Artivism panel. My name is Tamlyn Tomita, and I'm so excited, passionate, and a little bit nervous to be here with you today to dive in with all these people on the importance of the arts, why the arts are so important to this panel of wonderful activists, artivists, about activism and art and its power and how Artivism can heal us. Being an actor myself, the arts are super important because these are the stories that I'm here to tell. I'm here to build the new worlds, create the new voices that we all need to hear together. 2020 was an unbelievably zip hard year for millions of people, and across the world, and specifically in our country, BIPOC communities were disproportionately affected by not only by the pandemic, but our social justice movements. And many creatives have used artivism, art and activism, that intersection, as a way to promote social justice ideas and heal ourselves, oneself, and our whole communities together. I'm so moved by the leaders that we've gathered here today who will discuss how art and its programs have birthed and blossomed so many culture makers, and how arts has served as a unifier in our community. So please, everyone, welcome our panelists. First up is the Chief Education Officer at Inner City Arts here in LA. Please welcome Colette Williams Alleyne. You could wave. You're welcome. Thank you, Colette. Thank you for joining us. Next, she is the Associate Artistic Director of the Heidi Duckler Dance Company. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Himerria Wortham.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I saw your video of you dancing in the living room, and we're going to talk about that as to how we can all do that ourselves. It's so exciting. And next, she is the president of the Center for Cultural Power. We'd like to introduce to you Favianna Rodriguez. Is that your art in the background that I see? Because I took a look-see, I peeped
Yes.
all your drawings, so it's like, oh my God, I get to talk about your art. Thank you for joining us. Next, he is the producing artistic director of East West Players. Everyone, please welcome Snehal Desai. Thank you for joining us, Snehal. It's good to see you. Thanks.
Good to see you, Tamlyn. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And finally, she is a professor and author and the chairperson of the Shahbaz Center. Everyone, please welcome Ilyasah Shabazz. So let's get right into it. Could everyone just please just start by sharing what your role is in the particular organization that you represent and how that organization has impacted your community? We could start with Colette.
Well, as Tamlyn said, I'm the Chief Education Officer for Inner City Arts, a nonprofit organization in the heart of Skid Row in downtown LA. We provide arts and education services to schools, teachers, administrators, community partners, and youth throughout Los Angeles who are interested in learning about the arts and exploring creativity. We strive to create programs that meet the community's needs using arts as a tool of transformation. Our mission is to engage young people in the creative process in order to shape a society of creative, confident, and collaborative individuals. Our program, we serve students as young as kindergarten and provide opportunities through the first year in college through our college and career readiness program. We know that the skills that are acquired in the creative process translate to any path that students choose in life. Inner City Arts specializes in programming that is student-focused and multifunctional. And with us on our campus and providing a safe space for students to explore their creative voices, the opportunity to build beyond the art is what exists. We always work with the idea that there are no mistakes in art and that they're just opportunities to see things differently and a new approach and a new perspective. For our community, we create opportunities to do and be something you may have only imagined. And in our physical space, which is a beautiful campus downtown, we have, it's an amazing space where students definitely feel safe in our state-of-the-art studios. And we have a beautiful black box theater that is designed for community and national productions. And during COVID, everything has been happening online. And we have worked and pivoted, the word I'm struggling with these days, pivoted to make sure that Zoom is still safe, welcoming, and nurturing, and fosters creativity to the best of our abilities.
Thank you, Colette. Thank you so very much. Himerria, could you answer that as well? Your role, Heidi Duckler Dance, and how you create and how it's impacted your community.
We have a huge role in working with communities all around Los Angeles. And that means not only dancing in all of the spaces in LA, but also collaborating with these communities. So one of those meaningful focuses that I'm talking about is reflected in our 3 pillars, which are democratic dance, arts education, and spatial justice. Our practice of spatial justice involves activating space through dance and increasing accessibility to these spaces in an effort to make Los Angeles a more animated and equitable city. The reason I fell in love with the company is that it reveals truth about historical landmarks. It reawakens abandoned places and allows us to look at spaces that, through a different lens. This October, we celebrated 35 years of site-specific democratic dance with 10 days of socially distanced live events sprawling across Los Angeles and engaging the local communities and our partners. One of these spaces I got to see through a different eye, was the performance I had the pleasure of dancing in at the Baldwin Hills Scenic Overlook in Culver City. We transformed a moonlit parking lot, the surrounding luscious nature and a bathtub into our stage to bring to life a short love story from the Decameron, a collection of novels set in the 14th century Italy. So for me, democratic dance means dancing, transforming public spaces like that park. It's dancing in your living room, as you mentioned, and on the ledge of a 5th floor, parking lot. We do it all. And I've done it all with the company. Democratic dance is also dancing at any age and any level.
And because dance is using the tools of our body, it's perhaps sometimes the most fleeting one, because we're using that expressive form in order to tell the story or emote the emotions or the feelings and the thoughts that we have. And we only have our bodies and there's nothing to imprint it on. But that's why dance, in a living room is so subjective, but it's very personal, but it's also universal because we're all doing this at the same time. So thank you, Himerria, for that wonderful explanation as to what you do and who you are at Heidi Duckler. Because segueing to Favianna Rodriguez at the Center for Cultural Power, she's an artist who works mainly in print media, and watching and seeing the collections from 2020, 2019, the abstracts and the social justice, I was able to see just a whole pantheon of your artwork, Favianna. Could you explain what your role is and how that organization impacts your communities?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Very happy to join you. The Center for Cultural Power organizes artists of all type, musicians, actors, visual artists, performance artists, to get engaged in social justice so that through our work and through our cultural organizing, we can help transform our country into one that is more equitable and more aligned with nature, and that really becomes a sustainable place for all of us to live. Mm-hmm. And we do that through fellowships, trainings, opportunities for activism, and really training artists on understanding the power of culture, not just to transform ourselves, but to actually change our political reality, to imagine what's possible. I think that the role of artists is not just to react, but to really put forward ideas about the future that we're all hungry for, especially artists, BIPOC artists, artists who have been impacted by inequality. It's no surprise that so many of us in growing up, we didn't see the books, the stories, the shows, the dolls that reflected us, and that affects us. Culture shapes our imagination of what's possible. At the Center for Cultural Power, we believe that art is a necessity. It's not a nicety. It actually is a human right. It is fundamental to our health as communities. I am a visual artist and printmaker, but through my collaborations, I work with artists in all mediums, in entertainment, in pop culture, because what we share as creators, especially creators who have been left out of the dominant narrative, is that stories will set us free. You know, stories are really, they will help heal us. But in order to do that, we need to train artists. We need to give them the tools that they need, and also teach them how to organize to fight for cultural power.
Thank you, Favianna, because the idea that a print or a visual artist such as you can collaborate with other storytellers such as actors, musicians, and performance artists is that kind of intersectionality that we're all looking for as artists and storytellers, image changers, and world builders. And I think that's what we're all celebrating here together. Snehal, as producing artistic director of East West Players, could you tell us what your role is and your wonderful organization and how it impacts the community of Los Angeles and across the nation and around the world?
East West Players is the longest running theater of color in the country and the largest and oldest Asian American theater company. We're located in downtown in Little Tokyo, and we have a beautiful, I call it jewel box space, a 240 seat theater, which is what you see behind me. I am not there now. And you know what East West Players does, I put in two buckets. One is we offer opportunities to actors of color. We are a direct pipeline to the networks and studios. We do training programs, and we allow Asians and Asian Americans to play roles that traditionally we have not been able to play or excluded from, and to move beyond stereotypes. And the second thing we do is empowerment through storytelling. So we have our main stage production, and then we have our Theater for Youth program. And through all of that, we, you know, Asian and Asian American is a very big monolith, right? It covers many, many cultures and billions of people. And we seek to take that apart and really have a conversation within our communities and amongst our communities about issues that are affecting us, and how, you know, change is possible. We focus a lot on intersectionality. So we focus on things like mental health and communities of color, or race or gender identity. And ultimately, the biggest thing is work that has a social justice value and great artistry and craft are not mutually exclusive. And we seek to show that every day.
Moving on to last but not least, our last panelist, Ilyasah. Over there on the East Coast in New York, I believe that's true, correct? Is that's where the Shahbaz Center is located. Could you tell us what your role is, your legacy, and the community that you represent and the organization that you serve as director, and how it impacts all of us and how we can help you?
Well, so I am a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. It's right here. And I teach a course on the perspectives of justice in the Africana world. I love my students, but I'm also an author of several young adult books, and I am chairperson of the Shabazz Center, which is in New York City. It's important to me that our young people understand the necessity to be critical thinkers, and that they have the capacity to recognize injustice, not from the perspective of black and white, but more importantly, from the perspective of right and wrong. And so, you know, we feel that when the most marginal communities are able to flourish and live outside the threat of police violence and have safe and adequate housing, education, and healthcare, then we know all of our needs are being met.
Thank you so very much, because that shows how the practical usage of art, of storytelling can be used in order to affect change, and knowing that change is slow and art is out there and is looked at with our subjective eyes, that we know we have an objective, that we have this purpose in bettering the world for all of us. So thank you so very much. I'm going to now launch into the, I guess, the direct questions. Himerria, I think we've seen a lot of programming concerning the arts, and themes of action and being in action, and what you are specifically doing at Heidi Duckler Dance. Could you touch and tell us what, how you create the new narratives around healing and belonging so that it can be communicated to your audiences?
It's actually a great question that you're asking. We have had the pleasure to serve over 10,000 unserved youth and families in South and East LA. And we create unique education programs for schools, after school programs, seniors, veterans, and correctional facilities. And with that, we aim to be a vehicle for self-expression, confidence, inclusion, and collaboration. So this question that you asked has actually been an ongoing discussion in our teachers meetings. Over the past couple of years, as HDD's teachers have been discussing authentic ways of creating trust with a deeper and more meaningful connection with our students. What we're starting to learn is that as we step in to a new teaching residency, we can actually achieve that authentic connection when we approach our classes as a collaboration with our students. When we step into the room with the genuine goal of applying our teaching methodologies to the needs of the students as members of their unique community, then we arrive as guests in their world, as facilitators instead of saviors, because nobody wants to have that savior complex, right? Yeah, so I learned this idea in my experience working with California Institution for Women, CIW, which is a women's state prison located in Chino Hills. We had an 18-week residency with 30 women. And, you know, you go into a situation like that and you're like, I don't know anything about living in prisons, you know, I don't know what the life is. I know TV shows, I know the news, how they portray people in these systems, but I don't know anything. So I have to step in. I made the decision that I wanted to step into the classroom with a humble approach, you know, and a willingness to learn from them, you know. We visited the facility on a weekly basis for 2-hour classes and introduced dance as a means of self-healing. And at the beginning of those classes, my teaching partner and I tried to set the tone that the class was their class, you know, a space for them to cultivate their voices through self-reflection, self-reflecting journaling and body work. The purpose of the journaling was to explore what was moving them from day to day, and you know, how to cultivate that voice, you know, through you know, just learning your body and learning what's going on in your mind. So connecting the body and the mind together, you know. And I think we had an amazing experience, and it felt more like we were coming eye to eye, because not only was I sharing my experience as a dancer, as a performer, as a human, walking through life, as a brown person walking through life, but they also got to share their experience. And so we really tried to dismantle the hierarchy. You know, when you step into a room as a teacher, there's a hierarchy you have. We all understand that there's like the teacher position, and then there's the students. And it seems to, in my experience in those type of settings, it seems to create a sense of, well, the teacher's going to tell me what to do, and I don't have much voice in there. And so instead, we want the collaborative approach, and the collaborative approach brings us all possibly on the same level. Right. And that's what we experienced in this class. So it's democratic dance, actually, you know.
Art is self-expression, and I see that in what you're literally, and I'm not making fun, that everybody can be a dancer in their own living room, because we're feeling what we're feeling every day. Every day is a new day, and to be expressive of that is ownership of our art, of our voice. So thank you so very much for leading us in that path. Colette, I'm going to move next to you, because you started with this morning with snowflake snow art with your kids. And I know that because that's your children, but you're at Inner City Arts, the effects of the arts is something that you see daily with your students, however it is, in person or on Zoom. How are the arts impactful upon learning, and how important is it to incorporate the threads of social justice and activism, equity and diversity? There's a whole menu that we can address, but how and why and how can we help you introduce those arts into your programs?
Just in the dance place, my personal practice is dance. So coming into inner city arts and really looking at how the arts impacts learning, I can reflect on my personal story from, growing up to now. And what we really try to provide the space for is that healing. We know that the arts help manage anxiety for students. It helps increase empathy and awareness of themselves and others, and it supports analysis and synthesizing information. And that's not just in the perspective of the arts, that's in their academic learning as well. It impacts their school engagement, and we have seen that significantly with the terms that we're running right now. The students that we have served since COVID, more than 3,000 students just in our school day program. Teachers are saying that students show up on the days that they have the arts classes. They're engaged. Still a struggle to get some students to show their faces on camera, but they're showing up. And we know that that is a sign of being connected with the experience. So, ultimately students who participate in the arts and creative practices and experience artwork are developing like those neural pathways, and they're developing new habits. They're developing a new understanding of how to engage with life and how to engage with creativity. Mm-hmm. And with those transferable skills that they acquire, it improves their academic performance. And the research, there's research, tons and tons of research that talks about the social emotional learning of students. SEL is where we're focusing right now, just making sure that we are engaging students in those areas. Just thinking about how students can increase empathy towards others and building and maintaining their positive relationships. Part of the struggle that we have in schools right now is their discipline issues. So looking at how the social emotional awareness and how engagement with peers and with teachers and with our program, teachers create with the students in the school day. So they get to see their students in a different perspective. Students who may be struggling academically in the traditional formal education come to us, and they kind of break down those walls. They begin talking about their experience. They are able to articulate how they created their art pieces and what inspired them, whether that's visual art or performing art. So we know that it's an opportunity to break down barriers and increase problem-solving skills. That problem-solving and critical thinking skills is so important in education. And when you look at it with social justice and activism and equity, it's about storytelling. I heard that. It's about the storytelling through an individual's most comfortable medium, and it supports their analysis of topical and systemic issues. And that is very present right now.
Ilyasah, could you please take a moment of time and explain to us and elaborate to us the goal of helping others through the strength that you found and that the Shahbaz Foundation has found, and its purpose? Because finding strength in oneself is hard enough, but trying to find it and give it out to your communities is it's a heroic act. And the Shahbaz Center has always been a forerunner, a leader, a thinker of that kind of mission. And how can we apply that to BIPOC artists who are seeking their artistic voices and only to be heard?
Well, growing up in my household, my mother ensured that my 5 sisters and I learned about the significant contributions that women, Islam, Africa, and the diaspora made to the world. And so our home was filled with just spectacular art that celebrated who we were, that encouraged history, and most importantly, it encouraged self-love. And so in spite of the miseducation about Black Indigenous, people of color, my identity was intact. And, you know, I discovered that this type of learning, it enables inner strength and confidence. You know, if we don't know how to love ourselves, we certainly can't learn how to love others. However, if we love ourselves, we can most certainly love others. And it's equally important that artists are heard by creating our own stories and controlling the narratives. And so this is a part of what we do at the Shahbaz Center. It's what I make sure happens in the books that I create, and also, you know, with the curriculum that I implement for my students.
What you just said, Ilyasah, is that self-love is so important. It's the foundation, because if we want to help others, if we want to love others, we have to learn how to love ourselves. And sometimes that's such a hard lesson to learn. And from what I've read about you professing and literally writing about the importance of that brick, of that foundation in which we build off of, is so important. So I hope that every one of those artists who are here participating in this panel, we're all echoing that, but the audience members who are witnessing, is that they can take a little bit of themselves, of that love, that self-love for each one of themselves, himself or herself, in order to spread it around. So thank you, Ilyasah. Snehal, specific to the theater community, and especially here in Los Angeles, there's been this ongoing push to get BIPOC. And I love this about us artists, because we're always creating language and we're adjusting our language. So for those of you who do not know what BIPOC means, it means Black, Indigenous, Persons of Color. BIPOC communities and their work are recognized on a national level. And East West Players has always been on top of it, participating in hashtag American Theater So White and the ongoing efforts at EWP. Snehal, could you speak about what more is needed to create systemic change, systemic positive change, so that more diverse artists can enter these safe spaces, so we can have a more leveled playing field?
The story I tell is, East West Players has this Theater for Youth program where we commission a play about a prominent Asian American, and we tour it throughout LAUSD. And I directed the show a few years ago. And so as we went to different schools, and LAUSD is 90% children of color, I would just ask any, of the classes we were in, any of the kids to name an Asian American they've studied from K through 12. Just name one. 9 times out of 10, not one hand goes up, right? And this is in Southern California, in LA, where the Asian American community has been here the longest, the most robust, and we're one of the fastest growing communities. We just don't exist in terms of the narrative of this country, and our stories aren't told. And I feel like in order for us, we need to show the roots we have, and those stories need to come out. But I think the first thing is, we've been invisible for so long that we need to make ourselves visible through the work we do. I think if nothing else, we've seen through this pandemic that representation matters, right? Seeing our stories as a Netflix series, and that our stories are universal, that works that are diverse or centered on a non-white family can still have an audience and be bankable. So I think those things are showing. What needs to change is who's in the positions of power, who the gatekeepers are. Ultimately, that's where there's kind of a clog. And I think what is very, very different in this day and age is that people are now called out very publicly through social media. And I think that has helped a lot. And that has the speed of change and responsiveness has really been much faster than ever before. I think that the campaign I think about is, in Hollywood, the show us your writer's room, right? Take a picture of your writer's room. And the deafening silence that emerged, right? Like there was a bunch of, places that were very proud to show their writer's room. Right. But the vast majority did not, because that, the diversity is not hitting. It may be in front of the camera that's happening, but it's not hitting in all aspects of the industry, of the professions, of all the different fields that we cover. And so I think that that stuff is going to continue to happen. I think the pandemic has allowed a lot of time for us to sit at home and to think about that, and for our artists to hopefully create during this time. So I think all of that is very positive. I think the other thing is finally, for communities of color and organizations of color, we are being recognized for the work we are doing, so that for so long, the funding models, particularly for nonprofits, is you fund the problem. You don't fund the people doing the work. So I don't think any of us or organizations here get money for diversity. But if you have a diversity problem, you can get $1 million grant to help, right? And then what happens is organizations get that money, and then what do? They come to all of us, right? And they ask for our mailing list, and they ask us what to do, but they don't share any of the resources they have acquired to do that. And I think that is also changing. It hadn't for very, very, very long time, and there are still holdouts, but I think finally folks are realizing, why don't we support and champion those places that are doing what we want, instead of spending our time on those that may or may not come with us? Because the reality of it is, you may, seek to diversify those institutions, but we may not want to go there, right? They may not be telling our story authentically. We may not feel welcome, right? And a lot of the conversation has been around decolonizing practices, right? I think so much of our institutions are built on a colonial model. The nonprofit model with a board, right, is a colonial hierarchical model. And so that is, I think a lot of us have been spending time to figure out, how do we take that apart? How do we create more equitable systems? How do we create models of operation where we take ourselves out of a scarcity model and move into an abundance and plenty model?
Yes.
Because we have to look at things from a different lens. Otherwise, folks are constantly and always going to be excluded.
Right. There's so much to unpack and put away into my purse right there, what you just said, Snehal, because it is about it's about calling out persons who have been in those positions of power and telling them that we're not there to take it. We're there to share it amongst all of us who have been left out the picture, and to remove the centeredness of always white stories, white persons, white representatives in those positions of power, especially in the boardrooms and in the writers' rooms, and is to change, it's to include. That is the word inclusiveness. It's to diversify, and not the tokenism of just having a Black person or a brown woman or a yellow person or a golden man. That's the ideas that we're trying to discuss here. Thank you so very much for sharing what your thoughts about that. Favianna, at the center of cultural power, it's about bridging that gap between art and social justice. How do you think we can effectively create those equitable educational arts programmings and redistribute that power to the communities that have been traditionally left out, that have been outside, that have been othered or marginalized? How can we help you in terms of creating that equity and that equality?
Yeah, well, I really love what all the speakers have talked about so far. And, Snehal, you really nailed it when you said that the model that we have inherited, the model that we work in, is actually really set up in a way that allows for white supremacy to continue. I mean, if we think about even the arts sector and the creation of Hollywood and the cultural sector as we know it, it has really been a device to center, uplift, and perpetuate the greatness of white people. And so whatever cultural realm you look at, whether it's dance or performance, publishing, gaming, Hollywood, there is a massive entrenched power of white men. And the consequences to that are significant. As Snehal said, it means how we're humanized, right? It translates to who we incarcerate. It even translates, frankly, I believe that one of the reasons why, the number one people dying of COVID in this country are Black, and then followed by Latinx and Indigenous. And if you consider that the ways that our stories have been told have been really dehumanizing, it translates into policies that actually allow us to die, allow us to be put in cages, for our families to be separated. So the cost is significant. The way in which culture shapes policies cannot be underestimated. And therefore, what we need to be doing, I think, is a two-part strategy. So first is that we do need the stories. We need artists to share the complex stories of our communities. You know, as a Latina, it's not just about East Los Angeles or lowriders or Day of the Dead, right? Or, you know, or salsa and cumbias for that matter. We actually are a very complicated community, and we need a level of complexity to our stories. I always joke around that when we think of, you know, how human beings are represented, a white man can be an astronaut, he could be hanging out with dinosaurs, you know, in fantasy land, he could be imperfect, he could be any single thing you imagine is depicted by white men in our culture. And yet, when you look at how communities of color are depicted, we are in these very narrow representations, which actually end up hurting the way we're treated and creating these perpetuating systems of oppression. So on the one hand, we need complicated stories around race, around gender, right? Around including people with disabilities, and frankly, even the way we relate to the planet. Because the climate crisis is a product of a white supremacist colonial system that has permitted for the exploitation of some bodies, including Black bodies, Indigenous bodies, animal bodies, and the earth itself, right? And so when we think about, even there was a really amazing series in Variety that talked about that in 2019, there was 3 shows about the climate crisis. And I said, this is what white supremacy does. You know, the most affected by climate change are Black, brown, Indigenous communities, and yet we're not represented, right? You have white faces talking about climate, and I'm like, what's going on here, y'all? Like, where are our stories? We're the ones who our communities are devastated. So on the one hand, we need the artist stories, but on the other hand, we need to organize, and that's really what I keep hearing, is that we need to demand power. We have to remember a lot of these institutions have been supported by public dollars, right? By our city dollars, by our national dollars. Not to mention, if you really, you know, think about it, this is white wealth is the product of the exploitation of our ancestors. And so when we are, in the same way that there is a demand for reparations, there has to be a demand for cultural reparations, because the origin of American culture can be traced back to the exploitation of Black culture, right? And so we have to, when we talk about cultural equity, I don't think it's about you know, coming and just asking for our piece of the pie. I think it's actually, look, this is part of what we deserve. This is, you know, the culture has to represent how we look. Yeah. Otherwise, it's actually very dangerous. And we have seen that with Me Too. I mean, the signs are all over when the fact that, you know, how are we portraying some of these white young male mass murderers that over and over again are committing these same kinds of crimes. And so organizing, what I call cultural organizing, where we are, you know, demanding that the studios show us their writer's room, that we're really asking for real accountability, is a part of what we need to be doing. And so at the Center for Cultural Power, we support artist disruptors. And that is that artists, we are not just here to create, we're here to disrupt systems of oppression. I think that we are the generation. I grew up with the Panthers, and they would talk to me about Nina Simone. They would talk to me about all of these wonderful artists, but Nina Simone died without health insurance, as did Zora Neale Hurston. So even though they were doing amazing work, there was actually not an infrastructure to care for them. And that's what we have to do in our generation, is ensure that there is real wealth accumulation for our communities, that there is cultural assets, so that we don't always have to be dealing with these gatekeepers who frankly are on the pathway to obsolescence. I think that if these folks are not getting with the program, they're not going to be part of the future. I think the future is going to be a multiracial future. We're already seeing signs of it. And it's about increasing that and organizing, especially across impacted communities.
Yes, this is about the radicalization of love and art. And I think as artivists, as artists who are also activists, we're imagining a new world. We're creating the new world, and we're actually building it because we don't see it. And we're telling those stories. We're telling we're creating those bricks, those, the foundation of what it means to see the new world. And I applaud each and every one of you for what you've spoken about. All of us, I know, are particularly inspired by a quote by Ilyasah's father, Malcolm X, who said, quote, "We have the power of those who came before us have given us to move beyond the place where they were standing." Because education, especially in the arts, have birthed and blossomed many culture makers in Hollywood, but across the nation and around the world. And now there's an opportunity to continue to cultivate the change for our future while looking at our past. What are some lessons that you all think should be passed down to the next generation, to this new generation, to emphasize the importance of activism and open mindfulness and kindfulness within the arts and entertainment?
I would say one, it's knowledge, seeking knowledge, empowering. For me, it's empowering our students to seek the knowledge to keep themselves growing and learning and to challenge the system. I would say systems are meant to be tested and stretched, and so are our minds. Creative thinking for us removes barriers, and removing those limits are what shows us possibilities. So if we can break through the ceilings that have allowed for generational poverty and other disparities to affect the underrepresented populations that we serve, if we can inform our students and provide them with a safe space to make that happen, then they are on course for changing the world and making sure that calls like this continue and that our faces continue to be represented in the arts and education and in positions of power.
Oh, absolutely. I think we should talk about self-love, as says, I mean, it starts with self-love. If I love myself, then I feel heard by myself. And if I feel heard by myself, then I have space to hear others. And with that, we can find the empathy for each other. And with empathy, then we have the power of seeing everybody's story and everyone's needs. And it doesn't become a competition for who's more important right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of my things that I'd pass down to the little ones.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's about self-love. It's about loving yourself. It's not about how we look at the Zoom. It's about hearing our voice, our hearts, and our minds. So thank you for that reminder. What else do you think needs to be passed down to our kids in the next generation in order for arts and activism to continue towards the world that we all want to see?
Take risks. Don't be afraid. I think also in our communities, there isn't an opportunity to fail, particularly artists of color don't have the opportunities to fail that oftentimes our white colleagues have, but be bold, be brave, create the world you want to see. And it's gonna be something that no one else has seen, and that's okay. You know what I mean? That's where we need to go. The other thing is, artists of color need to open doors for artists of color, right? That is where the opportunity lies. And we have to, again, it's a self-love thing. So many of our artists don't love themselves. And so they surround themselves with white counterparts, with white directors, with white, and we're the ones that are sometimes holding each other back or not letting more of ourselves into the room.
Right.
So I think those are the two things. And then the final thing I want to say is that on the other side of this pandemic is actually when we become frontline workers, right? We have not as a country grieved. We have so much healing to do. Our communities have been so disproportionately affected. And that is our role to step in there, to show compassion, to build community, and to really let folks exhale. I think we've been holding our breath for so long. And we're gonna need that first before we can go forward.
Yeah, well, something I actually learned from my mentors, which is a bit unexpected, is that, when I was growing up and we could still feel the energy from the civil rights era, there was always messages of let's fight, we have to join the struggle. Yep. And something that I've learned and really through Women of Color Feminists is that we can't just be about our no. We also have to be about our yes. We can't always be fighting. We can't be struggling. We also have to be creating. And I think that so much of what we do has to be about the yes, about the future that has not yet arrived, as well as witnessing and healing from the trauma, the historical trauma. I think we are the generation with the tools to do that. I think that when we heal generations back and generations forward. And arts and culture is the way to do that, to witness, to process, to be able to have closure and help us move on to the new era, which we can do through our creations.
Yes, yes. And again, it's about being there and being thankful. It's when you're saying about moving forward and looking back, it's about being thankful for the lessons that we learned, about being able to say no, 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 but saying yes, 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 and thank you to all the leaders and the persons who led the way, who stepped in those stones on the path to progress, to our future, to betterment for all of us. And that leads me to our last panelist, Ilyasah, because I just want to say on behalf of the panelists here, as well as Americans all across the country, thankful for your legacy, thankful for continuing the work of your great father, and for us recognizing the efforts of Dolores Huerta, of Cesar Chavez, of Grace Lee Boggs, of Yuri Kochiyama, of so many others who have passed before us. But what do you think is important in looking back and being thankful and mindful and kindfulness that we need to pass on to our next generation of influencers and persons who are going to continue the work that you all doing here?
Well, thank you for that. Well, my father, I've got to go back to my father. He's quoted, and I was so happy to see this, that he is quoted 53.7 thousand times per hour in social media. Right? In spite of all of this misinformation, all of these negative portrayals of him that just weren't so.
Yeah.
Right? We're discovering that young people are turning to Malcolm X because they know he was committed to truth.
Yeah.
And truth, of course, is timeless.
Yeah.
And so there's a multi-racial movement that is driving our nation toward a more civilized space. A synthetic identity is being born. Our society, God willing, is moving forward. Bigotry and all of its ugly hate is losing, and a new era has yet to define itself. Young people are discovering that those in power, as this beautiful sister said, have misused power, and that there has got to be a better way. A new and better way. They're willing to roll up their sleeves and do the necessary work. A new generation of global citizens is developing with a willingness to embrace other cultures. I think it's extremely important that our educational curriculum is inclusive of historical facts. Contributions, not just white male landowners, right?
Yeah.
And so this open-mindedness is one of the cures, I think, for social justice. And I think that this is basically what we are all saying, right? That we simply just want our children to have the opportunity to learn about the truth in history, that we all made a significant contribution.
All right, so panel, I'd like to ask each and every one of you your thoughts on how we as arts activists or artivists can speak to professional creatives and those in position of power, and how we can encourage them to become supporters of artivism. What are some actionable ways that they can give back, those people in power can give back to our arts communities now?
So the answer I want to say, well, I'm going to say it is, make space and then get out of the room is, I think, the most direct thing I can tell you.
Yeah.
But I think the other key in all of this is mentor someone who doesn't look like you. because all of us are here because someone at some point believed in us, right? Someone opened a door for us and gave us an opportunity. And what happens is we tend to mentor those who remind us of ourselves or look like us. And so if you start to open that up, you're going to start opening up the gate, the doorway, the pipeline, whatever we want to call it, to others. And so I think it's that. And then I think the third thing is it's a moral responsibility, right? You know, it's not just business. It's just not a commerce. It's a moral responsibility at this point to make sure that there is equity and that everyone's story is being told or has an opportunity to.
A great way to support those is not only mentoring them, but also showing up for them when they do produce something. So if my friends and I are making a piece and it's about my story and my experience in the world, then listen, come and listen and support financially. We need the finances so we can continue. I mean, it's
because the government is not. Yes, exactly. And it depends on the fullness of our hearts, and it's the amplification. And I'm for sure going to follow each and every one of you and the messages and the stories and the foundation building that you all are doing. And I'm trying to encourage everyone who is viewing this panel to do the same, because that's the least you can do, is to let persons into your rooms, into your computers, into your head space, and to say, I want to help, I want to encourage, I want to support. So I'm encouraging you all.
In addition to what everyone said, I think that we need to be very bold, imaginative, and really articulate what it is that we want to see, and organize folks, and even those that don't look like us. You know, I think that there are a lot of white people who recognize that the current way that the system is functioning, the cultural system, is not working, it's not equitable, and it's actually leading to a lot of issues, whether it's toxic masculinity or just a blatant disregard for people of color in this country. And I think that we often, I think as artists, we are taught sometimes that somebody has to come discover us, or that somebody has to recognize us. But in the same way that we're bold and imaginative with our art, we can do that in real life, you know, and we can say, we can invite people to the table and say, like, hey, this is our vision for what we want to do. Hey, studio, this is something that we're thinking about, and we are coming to you as equal partners in how we invite you. We invite you to get on this train, because the train is moving. And I think that so much about organizing is actually us standing in our power around knowing that this is what's right. It's what's right for people. It's what's right for our planet, and articulating that. You know, I always tell artists when I train them about cultural power is that it just takes one artist to make a huge impact, whether that's, you know, a Colin Kaepernick or a Nina Simone or a Selena, right? That it takes one person to kind of kick off a series of events that will eventually lead to a huge wave of transformation. But we need to be courageous, and we need to name that. And sometimes it may feel hard to say, you know, my dream is to create a Latinx media company. You know, it might feel hard, it might feel intimidating, but the more that we can be bold about our ideas and put them out, I really trust that the response will come. You know, white folks are doing their organizing for the first time. 10 years ago, we didn't have books like White Fragility. We didn't have organizations like Surge. So they're getting organized. And it means that, you know, it's time for us to also go to the powerful white folks in Hollywood who are aligned with our values and say, hey, organize your people. Here are some ideas, because I actually think we should be presenting the pathways forward and asking for white allies to move their money, move their wealth. It's time to, I love what Edgar Villanueva talks about, Edgar Villanueva, the writer of Decolonizing Wealth, that moving money and resources is actually a way to heal, to get in right alignment, because those resources were not yours to begin with.
I'm going to piggyback on Favianna and say move the money, but also add to that reflect on the data that's being produced. When you look at LA, in California specifically, 2.7 million jobs come from the creative industries. That's not just on stage. It's not just behind a camera. It's the skills that transfer. So look at the data, look at the disparities and what lead to those disparities, and then look at historically what has shown to improve the lives of youth as they're growing up. And then the people with money and power need to reflect on their privilege and their experiences, and specifically the creative experiences and their passion projects that have led to their success, and recognize the people that came behind them to support them, and then decide what they want to do, what is their responsibility, and helping that to continue throughout the generations. And I would say specifically my call to action is advocacy, policy implementation, and oversight that ensures consistent and equitable funding for the arts over a sustainable period of time, not based on a trend, but over a sustainable period of time that allows true evaluation of an assessment of successful experiences, progress, and growth for people in general, our youth from K through 12, and looking at how we can make sure that stays in our schools and in our communities to truly allow for transformation. And I think I heard Snehal say it, open-mindedness. Being open-minded to understand that one of the main pathways to growth is resilience. Mm-hmm. Resilience is one of the main pathways to growth. And through resilience, we learn to cope and to come to a place of post-traumatic growth. Mm-hmm. So even where we are right now, if we look at what the arts has the power to do, the arts, artivism, social justice, and allowing people to put their emotions and express themselves through a comfortable space, we can get beyond where we are and get beyond all of the social challenges that we've been facing historically to truly affect change in our community. Move the money.
Advocacy, oversight, and policy implementation. That's those are key takeaways that I think all of us here on this panel can yell to the mountaintops to say this is what we need in order to promote and provoke change, because change is something that's going to be hard and slow, but each and every one of you have been doing the hard work. It's just amplifying your message and encouraging everybody to hear that this is all about including everybody. So it's not just a simple centeredness on white people. It's about Black, it's about brown, it's about indigenous, it's about the golden, it's about the persons who are not included in what I just said, and it's about including it in the language, how we speak and communicate our stories. I just am so thrilled, and again, I'm really honored to continue to learn. And I think that's what is so humbling, and it's so vulnerable that each and every one of us don't know everything, and to be able to participate in this kind of Zoom meeting and to have the willingness and the desire to share it all is your power. And you do it through the arts, you do it through something that's vulnerable, that's emotive, that is sharing in nature. Because if we're artists just stuck in our living room and we don't disseminate it, that nobody gets to see the power of our story, the power of our change, the power of our forward-sightedness, that we need to look forward, but we need to look back at how we felt and how we learned and what we were, where we were laid baggage with. And this is what we have to do as individuals. This is what we have to do as groups and communities, as people of color communities, and as a nation of Americans. This is the story that we're all going to continue to make sure it's more diverse, it's more equitable. So everyone, I believe we're coming to the close of our wonderful panel, Healing Artivism. I'd just like to ask one quick question, which you could give a quick answer to. What would you like to wish for everybody watching this panel for the year 2021?
That's a great question. I mean, an alcoholic beverage, where I would start for everyone. But I think, the real thing is hope for the future. Right? I think it's been a really tough year. It's been a really tough past 4 years for our communities. And so I think, as a number of you said, we are resilient communities that have been here and survived through so much. And I think hopefully that hope of looking forward and of change can return for all of us.
I just want to wish everyone the opportunity or the chance to reflect on 2020 and how it affected us and create something. That's what I want you to do. I want you to get in your living room, in your bathroom, in your shower, wherever. It doesn't matter. Nobody's watching. Everybody is. Just create something out of what we experience, don't let it just fly by. Don't sit in the pain. Don't let the pain sit in your body. Make something out of it.
2020 showed us everything. It showed us truth. And truth is the greatest healer. So I would say internal healing.
Yeah.
External support. And never losing sight of the power of our minds to overcome. And I will go with Snehal again, hope and faith. No matter what, I think it's recognizing our strength and what we are able to overcome and what we can take from challenging situations that will only allow the flowers to grow.
What Arundhati Roy called this pandemic a portal, that we have gone through a portal of transformation. And my wish for everyone is that we don't go back. There's no going back. The systems that have been revealed and exposed are no longer working, and we don't have to go back to them. There's an opportunity to create something different. And so I encourage everyone to really feel what happened. What was it like to be at home, to be with your families, to be at another pace, and also to recognize what is critical and what really is the most important for our societies, including for us to be healthy and for us to care for each other. Care, for me, is something that really stood out. So feel that, experience that, and make sure that you take those messages to your elected officials.
That we recognize that Black power is not exclusionary. It simply says that we all deserve an opportunity to sit at the table of humanity. And and when that happens, that we will all have love, peace, and joy collectively.
Collectively. Thank you so very, because you're always talking, you all, sorry, not we, because it's a practice, right? Y'all are talking about inclusivity, about collectivism. It's about the idea of democratic art. It's about making sure everybody gets that chance, gets that hope fulfilled, gets that opportunity to tell their story, to expand their art. And I just want to thank each and every one of you, because it really has been such a mind-blowing honor to be able to discuss how healing art is, how wonderful it is, how scary, how dangerous it can be, because it's in order to open up our minds and our hearts, it's opening up our vulnerabilities in order to see a better world. And I think that's what art is. It's about opening up our minds and our hearts to all of us who are participating in that art form. So thank you, each and every one of you, Favianna, Snehal, Colette, Himerria, Ilyasah, and the Hollywood Reporter, for making this happen, and to each and every one of you here in 2021 for finally tuning in and watching us all.